To help you create this target list, you can go to the library in whatever city you live in. Pull up what's called the city directory. You can go through the companies that are usually going to be categorized by industry areas. Is it manufacturing? Is it finance, real estate, healthcare? All of those things are going to be categorizations of businesses, and you can again fine-tune your focused areas having looked at yourself, identify the area that you want to go into and that you want to continue with. So you put together that list of 30 to 40 target companies. Keep in mind what we're describing here is a 45 to 48 day process of identifying the work that you want to get into. So it's not a long-term thing if it's done properly. Identifying those companies should be a process of spending maybe 4 or 5 hours sitting down with a directory or some kind of source to give you access to those company names. With these company names, you also get people names to contact in those organizations. You want to address every piece of your correspondence to somebody in the organization specifically. Don't do to whom it may concern or to the human resource director, personnel director. You want these contacts to be focused and targeted to an individual. Here's the next step in the process. Number 1 was to identify the companies. Number 2 is to send a letter of introduction to each company. I know this is an unusual piece and something that most people aren't used to doing, but I'll tell you why we're going to do this and why it's important. Let me cover the other 2 points briefly and then we'll come back because we're going to send a letter of introduction. Then you're going to follow up that with a cover letter and resume, then a phone contact. Those 3 things give you exposure in that organization 3 times. Now this is simply a marketing tool that we get from knowing sales and marketing principles. We know that if you're selling Lazy Boy recliners, if you can get me to see that advertisement or hear about that 3 times, my response rate goes up dramatically. Guess what? In this process, as I've said, you're selling something, and that something is you. If you can get that company or organization to see or hear from you in some fashion 3 times, their response rate goes up dramatically. It's just that simple. So we're going to use that marketing principle in marketing you. So let's go back to number 2. That is sending a letter of introduction to each company. You want to stage these in a way that you send them out. Don't send out 30 at one time. It's too many to follow up on in a consistent manner. Send out no more than 10 or 12 at a time so that you can stage each step of the process and then do the follow-up that's necessary to get the results you want. The introduction letter is just that. Simply stated, it should be brief and require nothing of the recipient. It should state, this is my background, similar to what the skills summary in your resume is going to state. These are the kind of positions I would be a candidate for. I know a little bit about your company. I'd be interested in talking to you about being involved there. I'll forward my cover letter and resume in the next few days, and that's pretty much it. No requirement of them, simply inform them that they are going to be getting something in addition from you. Then the number 3 step in this process is to actually send your cover letter and resume. Most of you are used to that process. You want to send that about a week after the letter of introduction. Again, address that cover letter to a specific person. Get that name from a business directory, or if you have trouble getting a name, simply call the company. We find receptionists are wonderful about giving out information about who's in charge, who's going to review, who's the person responsible for a particular area. Just ask and get that name and direct your correspondence to that individual. In the cover letter, you want to recap some of the things you would have in the resume. You want to state, what is the purpose here? Why are you responding? If it's a particular advertisement that you've already seen or you've talked to somebody else who works there, certainly you want to state that. You go through what's unique about you. What do you know about the company? What can you offer them? And that's what's going to take place next. This should be only 2 or 3 brief paragraphs, never more than 1 page. And it shouldn't even fill an entire page. But in that last paragraph, you're going to state what's going to happen next. That's where you're going to put in the ending we discussed a little bit ago. Knowing your busy schedule, I'll call you on Tuesday of next week, or I'll call you Thursday morning at 10 o'clock to discuss mutual benefits for us in this process. That's the kind of form that you want to have and what you want to have at the end of the cover letter. That lets the person know they don't have to do anything, but they're forewarned you're going to be in contact with them. And obviously then you want to carry through with that. Now another small point of detail here is that I recommend that you send letters and do all your contacts so that it reaches the recipient on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Simply because we know that on Mondays, people are overwhelmed with details. On Friday, they're looking forward to the weekend. If your resume or cover letter comes in or your introduction letter arrives on a Friday, chances are it'll get buried in some mail. They may not see it for the next 2 weeks. So it's just a simple technique. Make sure your correspondence reaches them on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and that goes for your phone calls as well. The fourth point in this process, and number 1 was to identify the target companies. Number 2, send a letter of introduction. Number 3, send your cover letter and resume. Now the fourth point then is to do the phone follow-up. You have to do this. It's very, very important. My experience is, however, that only about 2 or 3% of job hunters actually do this. Now believe me, it's very easy to bring your name to the top of the list if you do just this one thing. Do a phone follow-up. Don't be afraid of being persistent or pushy. You want to call 4 or 5 days after they should have received the resume, but you have to call. Let me give you an example of how this works. I may have sitting on my desk 70 resumes that I've received from people for a particular position. Then I get a phone call. That person says, "This is Don Jones calling. Did you receive my resume?" And I'm going to say, "Wow, Don, I think it's here somewhere." "Well, I know what your company does. I really feel like I've got the skills that you're looking for and would love to be part of your organization. When can we talk?" Just that simple. That's what you would say in a phone contact. You don't have to ask if anything is available. You don't have to ask for an interview. Simply say, "When can we get together and talk?" Now, it's very easy for me as the interviewer to say, "Well, why don't you come by tomorrow about 2 o'clock? I'd love to meet you." You've just made the process a whole lot easier for me as the interviewer. If I have to go through every resume, screen the candidates with sorting out decisions, call somebody on the phone, see how they sound on the phone, schedule them for an interview, that's a process few people enjoy. You've just saved me an incredible amount of time by taking the initiative to call me. And if I like what I hear on the phone, I'm likely to just have you come in, even if your credentials are not as good as the other 69 people in the stack. That's a process we know as real, and we've seen it happen time and time again. So you go through these steps. Identify the companies, send a letter of introduction, send a cover letter and resume, then do the phone follow-up. This process does get results. We've seen people who have sent out over 1,000 resumes with no results, who've been able to get 5 interviews with 3 offers in a 45-day period using this method. Remember, no one's going to come looking for you. You must do an active, aggressive search. Everything that you do prior to the interview is preliminary. Remember, no one's going to hire you from a resume, nor do you want them to. Resumes and the active search lead to interviews. Interviews get you the job. Yes, this sounds like a sales process. Guess what? It really is. So if you're not that peacock, but you're more the owl, you're probably put off by all this self-promotion. You might see it as egotistical, patting yourself on the back to tell everyone how great you are. Well, just see it as a means to a profitable end. Because if you learn how to do this process well, it can mean thousands of dollars in your bank account and immeasurable amounts of satisfaction and feelings of accomplishment. That's what proper placement and maximization of abilities can do.